Thanks, Andy. And thanks to all the MidCamp organizers. And for everyone who's logged in, this is bringing chart making out of the back end. Okay. I'm Daniel Cothran, or on Deleco on Drupal.org. I work at JSI. We're a public health company named after the father of epidemiology, Dr. John Snow. Before this year, I frequently had to explain what public health and epidemiology are. Sadly, that's no longer the case. As you might have seen, there are a lot of challenging issues in public health, and we have a lot of projects working to address many of these issues. Some of those projects had Drupal websites and wanted to visualize their data, and so I started working on a Drupal 8 version of the charts module, and I have since become the primary maintainer. So let's get started. Count how many times you've thought about charts in the last few weeks. If you can't think of a time, let me remind you of the phrase flatten the curve. This phrase has been tossed about so many times these past weeks, it's already been memed, as you can see on the slide with the cattening the curve little graphic. I could spend a lot of time telling you why data visualization is important, but that would be a waste. You already know you're here. What I do want to say is this: it's time for data visualizations, proper accessible data visualizations, to be more routinely included in our content management, just like images or video. For that to happen, we need to make it easy for everyday users to create their own charts. And because Drupal feels like home, you know, that place we're all stuck, I want people to be able to create these visualizations without needing to leave Drupal. By the way, Drupal, the community was talking about flattening the curve years ago. In this presentation, I will walk you through a few scenarios involving data visualization and show you how the charts module can help with each of them. Are there other technologies that could also do the job? Yes. Will I be covering them? Mostly not. If you are looking for the consumer reports of charting technology, well, you'll probably give me a filled-in black circle at the end of this presentation. Little joke from my mom there. Being maintainer of the charts module, I'm doing everything I can to make it a better, more useful module, including by spreading the word and trying to bring others into the fold. All that said, I will mention a couple alternatives at the end. I also hope to hear from you. What are you looking for when it comes to data visualization? Please be thinking about that. With that, let's dive in and look at some scenarios in which you may find yourself. I'll be assuming that you have the charts module installed and a charting library in place. I'm also assuming you can install additional modules or you have someone who can help you do that. So scenario one is, I want a dashboard. My company being a public health company, following links about COVID-19 was not just something we did during lunch break. We also have a data viz listserv, and that's where I became acquainted with this controversial Information is Beautiful data pack about COVID-19. My first thought, I could build this dashboard using the charts module. A data dashboard is a common ask at my company. Last year, when I presented at MidCamp, I had finished a dashboard on tuberculosis or TB data the day before. I've also built dashboards for tracking rollout of an injectable contraceptive known as Cyanopress, tracking communication campaigns around HIV, and tracking indicators around project performance. The data in the TB dashboard pictured on the slide are primarily from the WHO, and they've been releasing updates to these data in the form of massive CSV files each year for probably at least a decade. My clients and colleagues who worked with me on these dashboards have been studying TB and monitoring health systems for years, but they found something worth investigating nearly every time we looked at these charts together. Charts makes it easy to build dashboards within Drupal, so let's walk through a couple options for doing this. Option one is to use Layout Builder and Charts Blocks or Views. I was slow to jump on the Layout Builder train because I was using a theme that doesn't work well with Layout Builder. But once I started using it, I found it to be a solid option. The fact that it's built into core is a great bonus. You can set up layouts for a whole bundle, in other words, a content type, or on a per entity basis. While I was preparing for this presentation, I did find a few drawbacks. First, the settings tray, which is how you would normally add an item to the layout, is too narrow. it can't contain the table data entry that comes with the most recent version of charts. I also ended up needing to add a line of CSS in order for my charts to stay in the same row. That may be unique to Layout Builder's use with charts, and I think it would be an easy bug to fix. So step one for this is to create a dashboard content type, or at least that's how I would do it. So you can see that in the picture. The next step is to manage the display of that content type and enable Layout Builder by checking the boxes that you can see toward the bottom of the screenshot. From there, you would create a dashboard node. And then after you've saved it, you would go in and adjust the layout. And one of the things you could do is click Add Section and then add a layout to that section. And in this case, I have a 3-column grid. Once you have the layout in place, you have the option for adding blocks to that layout. These can be blocks that come from a custom block type, or they can be blocks that are generated by a view. You can also insert fields here. In my case, in the next slide, I have added a chart block. So one thing that I did do with this is I manually adjusted the width of the settings tray using inspect element, and I widened it a little bit so that I had more room to enter in my data that you can see in the table display. So I added 3 different charts, and then I saved the layout and went back to the page, and you can see them here in a row, just like this. So you see it was fairly simple to do. And as I was mentioning, you can include various types of charts, charts that are made as blocks, charts that are fields on a content type, or charts that are coming from a view display. And if you use those, I think those are particularly well equipped for dashboards because you can have contextual filters. In other words, some sort of argument up in the URL that allows you to filter per page. You can also add exposed filters to any of these view-based charts. The second option for building a dashboard is to use paragraphs and charts fields. And you can actually use Layout Builder for your paragraph display if you want to. Because with paragraphs, you are generally working within the node edit page, it offers more room for the chart's configuration form than the settings tray of the Layout Builder. And this may also be a more familiar way of adding content for longtime Drupal content managers. Because you're setting up paragraph entities, there may also be more extendability and reusability by going with this option. However, the likelihood that you would have more than a few design patterns seems low. A potential drawback to using this option is that paragraphs is a big, complex contributed module. It can work really well, but it can also be a little bit hard to manage, especially if you have a multilingual site. So for this option, step 1 is to add a paragraph type. And in that paragraph type, you would want to add at least one chart field, which I have shown in the screenshot. Then you would add a content type set up to use the paragraph, and I would suggest potentially having the option of adding multiple instances of that paragraph. Then you would create your node, and as you can see depicted in the screenshot toward the bottom, there's a chart paragraph, and you can see the chart field with its setting form there, which is where you would enter in your data. Once you have completed the node edit page and you save your node, this is what the front end might look like. In my case, I had a text area field on the left and a chart on the right in each paragraph. Okay, so the second scenario that I wanted to go through is I want to display the results of a web form survey. The Drupal community has an amazing tool for surveys, the Webform module. There are many good reasons to have users submit a web form rather than publish a node. There's no need for account signup, the permissions are a little easier to manage, and the interface is better. A nice feature in certain circumstances is to display the user's results back to them after submission. either just their results or their results incorporated with all the other results. This can encourage users to submit, especially if we're talking about routine data collection, which is an important type of data collection in the public health field. Charts can be a great way to allow users to see their inputs were important and to encourage participation in routine data collection. There are at least a couple of ways of generating charts with web form results without the need to write code. I almost always use views to construct the charts on my site. So when I tried to plot web form results, using the Webform Views module would be my first instinct. The great thing about this option is that you can keep your data within the web form results table, and you can build charts how you normally would. However, you have to be really thoughtful about what you're looking for in order for this to be a viable option. The Webform Views module also has an unpleasant naming convention. Instead of the field name, you get Webform Submission Value, Webform Submission Value 1, 2, etc., and it can be a little less user-friendly. So I'm not sure what's happening here. Sorry about this. Can you all still hear me?
Yes, we can still hear you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let me try screen sharing again. Okay, I don't know why it doesn't like this slide. So I'm going to stop sharing that, and I'm just going to exit out of the presentation. I apologize for the technical difficulties.
No worries. Give it another try, and then I just downloaded your presentation from, this is a good time to remind people your slides are up on the MidCamp site. So I have your slides local. Worst case, can do something else. But keep on
Can you see
trying.
my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I see the slides layout.
Great. Yeah, I may keep it here for a minute. So the first step is to create your web form. And with your web form, add at least, well, you don't have to add at least one number field, but typically number fields are easier to plot. You don't have to necessarily rely on aggregation. And then you'll want some results in your web form. So I've added a couple just sort of dummy data. And the way I have this set up is there's a text field for the name of a module, and then 3 number fields for the 7, 8, and 9 versions of that module. So I've completed this twice in my little demo. And then you would create a view and add your different web form fields to the view. You would set the display format to be a chart and then configure the settings for that chart. So if you look in this screenshot, I've made the module name field the label field, and then I've made the number fields for 7, 8, and 9 versions the data providing fields. And when you go and you preview, you'll see you have, in this case, a column chart. And the way it's done here is it's clustered by submission. So the first 3 bars that you see or 7, 8, and 9 version of the charts module, and then I did it for Views database connector as well. Another way that you could do this, visualize these same data, would be to stack the chart, which would allow you to fit in more different web form results into the same chart. So a second option for creating charts based on web form results uses Web Form Content Creator to turn these results into nodes, which can then be queried in Views and displayed as charts. This tends to be a little easier to query in Views than the Web Form Submissions table, and it gives you a little additional flexibility when it comes to your data structure. For example, you can turn a single web form submission into multiple nodes. Drawbacks to this approach are that you have to set up the connection between the web form submission and the node. You have two copies of the same data, the opportunity for something to go wrong in the process of node creation, and the contributed module that is fairly new and not mature. It's not covered by the security policy and only has approximately 200 users currently. So again, with this one, you would start by creating your web form. And then in this case, you would also create a content type that would receive the web form submission data. Then you would create a web form content creator entity, which allows you to select the web form to use and the content type to send the results to. And then you can configure that web form content creator entity, and you can basically map the fields in the content type to the field, or the fields from the web form into the content type. So because I had a number value for 7x, 8x, and 9x, I created 3 different web form content creator entities, which will then generate 3 different nodes per web form result. So I am showing you again the same web form basically, except this one was designed for web form content creator. And when I submit this and then go into the content screen, you can see I submitted it twice, and so there are 6 results, 3 for charts and 3 for Views database connector. So the next step is to add a view of your created content type, edit that view, configure it to use the chart format. And in this case, I decided to use aggregation, and I'm showing the version as the label and summing the downloads field. And when I show you the next screen, that's the preview of that result, which I made a pie chart. So another scenario that you might find yourself in is, I want anonymous users to generate charts. In this case, I'm only going to give you one option, and that is using Views fields OnOff and the exposed chart type modules. Exposed chart type is bundled in. It's a field that's bundled in with the charts module, and Views fields OnOff is a contributed module that I ported to Drupal 8 along with Jack Franks. So the first few steps are to enable that module and then edit your view that's using a chart display, and then configure the on-off form field, which you can see at the bottom of the field list there. I don't have the actual configuration screen open, but it lets you choose other fields within the same view to be able to toggle between. I also configured the exposed chart type field, which has a similar sort of layout to the configuration for the Views fields on-off field. And you can see there that I've selected the chart type options that I want available, and the selection type. In this case, it'll be a single select. So I saved my view, and then I've opened a new browser and went to the Views page as an anonymous user. And so you can see there's a chart, but it's got a lot of data and it's not necessarily going to be that helpful to me. However, there are all those filters up at the top. And so an anonymous user could then apply some of those filters as you can see in this next slide. And I just wanted to point out a couple different things. The first filter is chart title, and that is a custom module that I created that allows you to write the title that you want input into the chart. So you can see that that's applied. The next is the exposed chart type, which I had selected column for that. So now you're seeing a column display of the chart. I selected both the award value in US dollars and the population fields to be displaying. I picked a location to narrow down the results. I picked location and award transaction category are both taxonomies that are on the content type that we're displaying with this view. And I also have an exposed sort here, which I'm not using. And in this case, this is using the HighCharts library, which has options for downloading this developed chart as an image or as a data table. And so someone could take this and add it to their own report or something like that. So I mentioned earlier that I would talk about a couple other charting resources. So the first one that I wanted to mention is DCAN, otherwise known as the Open Data Platform. And to my knowledge, this is still a Drupal distribution that has really powerful charting capabilities and sort of data storage and everything. The drawback to this is that it is a distribution and it has sort of a specific setup. So you're starting from a particular information architecture, whereas with the charts module, you can basically take any website, any Drupal website that you have, install the charts module, and then visualize data sort of however you want. The next thing I wanted to point out is there is a CK editor plugin for creating charts. It's fairly limited in features, but it's extremely easy to use, and it's great for if you're wanting to add charts into a text area field. However, if you want to have a view or other things like that, it's not going to enable you to make charts that way. The final thing I wanted to mention is the HighCharts editor, which I haven't used myself, but just reading about it, it seems like it has a lot of great features, and HighCharts is an extremely powerful charting library, which is one of the ones that the charts module is able to make use of. So that's the end of my formal presentation. You remembered earlier that I asked you about different scenarios in which you might want to have charts. So now would be a great time to talk about that. I'm happy to field any other charts related questions. So with that, I'll go ahead and open it up for questions and comments.
Just a reminder, you can put those in the chat. If you raise your hand, I could also unmute you and you can talk directly. Either one works. There's a question, Frederick. I'm going to go ahead and try and find you and unmute you.
Frederick,
Hey, how's it going? Can you hear
great.
me?
Yeah, thanks
Yep.
for your question.
Yeah, no problem. So, yeah, I saw your presentations. I've watched your videos before. One thing I'm still trying to wrap my head around is just kind of best practices in terms of preparing for the data so they can be charted properly. I think the use case that I had was it was a D7 site, but I mean I know you've done some D8 stuff, and I'm I'm upgrading that site. But it was a D7 site with Civi CRM, and I know the way that data is stored is not the best. But I was just curious, what are just some best practices? Is it because I mentioned you said like, hey, make it a number of fields, so you don't have to use aggregation. That seemed to be like a really interesting nugget there. Are there other things when it comes to kind of making sure that you can do your charts? One, I guess the specific scenario I'm thinking of is trying to combine multiple data sets onto a single chart so that they can be compared. So I know you had some examples there of different types. But I'm just kind of curious, is it just making sure it's a number and that the values are numbers is kind of like the big thing to make sure all the view stuff works, or are there other things?
Yeah, that's a great question, and actually sort of brings me to another couple of talking points. Yeah, I would say just in general, numeric fields are going to be the easiest to chart. You can also, if you do aggregation and then do a sum or a count, it should be able to read that as well. But generally, if you're setting it up in a way where it's reading the number from one of your fields and then using a label from something, that tends to work best. And you can do that both aggregated and unaggregated. I generally, like I said, am building charts based on views. And as you are probably aware, views is really great if you have like 50 different things you want to show or less. And then once you start to get into like 100, 200, 300, it can take quite a while for the view to be able to render, because it's trying to pull in each one of, like, let's just use content types as an example. It's trying to pull in each node in order to grab the data from it and display it. So if you're trying to do something that's really data intensive and you would need like thousands of data points and things like that, views wouldn't be a good solution there, unless you do one of a couple different things. So one option is there's a module called denormalizer, which I can't remember if it was at the Washington DrupalCon or at a previous I think it was DrupalCon. There was a presentation on denormalizer, and there's now a Drupal 8 version of denormalizer. And what it basically allows you to do is, instead of like the way the database is structured now, where you have multiple different tables that sort of comprise your node data, it allows you to create basically a flat table where each row is going to have like your node ID and all the values of your different fields on that content type. And you can connect your view to that denormalized table. And instead of having to load your node, it just pulls directly from the row of that denormalized table. So it can pull data a lot faster that way. Another option is if you have either a database table or a remote database, you can use something like the Views Database Connector module, which I mentioned earlier. And that pulls directly in the same way, just like straight from a table. So it doesn't have to do the entity loading, which is what makes views so slow. You can also, if you have your data in like some other format and you have a developer, you can use the charts API to be able to create a chart. The other thing I would say is certain modules. I was going to present this, but then I thought my presentation would go too long, and it looks like it sort of is. Drupal Commerce.
We'll give you a few more minutes. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Drupal Commerce can be, the price fields I've had a little bit of trouble with sometimes if I'm wanting to use them with views. And so I created a little sort of helper module called Commerce Views Connector. And that has a method in it that's sort of a general method that Views uses to get the value of a field. And that makes it easier for charts and for some other modules like Views Simple Math Field to be able to get the value of the number of your price and allows you to chart that. So I hope that was helpful. Is it okay if I take at least the next question?
Yeah, we'll try and stop at 2:35 here. But yeah, I see Jess has a question. Is that what you're gonna take?
Yeah.
Great.
So organization charts, I have not tried to use with the charts module. I think just from what I've seen of them, they can be pretty complicated, and so I haven't really seen a good way to make like a standardization there. I think that you probably could relatively simply use the charts API to generate organization chart. I do have an example, not of an organization chart, but of using a Google Geo map. I think that's what it's called, or a geo chart, which allows you to have like different gradients of colors on a map. And that I was able to do pretty simply using the charts API and really just minor code.
I'm a glutton for punishment. There's 2 minutes left. There's one question from Jason. Are you aware of anyone using this to chart data obtained via RESTful web service call? The call being made from Drupal, not the front end.
I am not.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody. Once again, we're going to be getting another session in this room, but thanks so much. Feel free to continue the conversation in either MidCamp 312. You can take it to the MidCamp Slack general hallway and start a thread there. Please provide feedback on the MidCamp site for this session. And we will have we'll have a transcript of this up on the MidCamp site at a later time. Thanks everybody for joining, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.